Live from Reno, Nevada, this is the Next Level Property Management Multifamily Podcast, offering an inside look at the deals, trends, and strategies shaping the Northern Nevada multifamily market. Delivering over 25 years of high-performance multifamily management and consulting services. Through data-driven insights and market expertise, we're elevating multifamily strategies to the next level. And now, here are your hosts, T. Tran and Chris Fody.
Hello, and welcome back to the Next Level Podcast. T and Fody here with you. So earlier this year, we were talking about legislation. And we talked about a lot of the housing bills, obviously, that we're kind of going through this session. That was the 120-day sprint that kind of happens. We've had all of our signatures or vetoes or whatever the heck was going to happen now. So what happened?
Good question. It looks like some of them did get passed, some failed. So it'd be good to kind of go through these. I know it's interesting for us, but also our clients. So I'm glad that we're doing this.
Yeah, there were a lot of bills and a lot of repeat bills. So Assembly Bill 131 talked about accessory dwelling units, ADUs, but they were specific in the historic properties. And we talked about this, obviously, previously, and how this has been an ongoing conversation, even locally in the city of Reno and Sparks and whatnot. You had some interesting thoughts on this last time about parking and...
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, a beneficial thing for people that own properties if they have the space to be able to set up some sort of living arrangements in the backyard or something like that. I mean, I think it really depends on the type of property, but the reason why I think it makes sense to me why they're at least looking at it is because we are seeing a lot more like multi-generational housing, especially with the cost of real estate. We're seeing people get into those sort of situations if they can. In Reno, being kind of smaller and having built all over the place, and there's not really a ton of other places to build, it seems like a good conversation to at least have.
Yeah, the conversation's been going. And because this particular bill was restricted to historic properties, it failed.
It failed, okay.
It didn't fail because of historic properties. It failed because a lot of people had a lot of questions about it, right? Like, do you have appropriate sewage piped through? Do you have parking available? Because in a lot of like old Southwest Reno and things like that, the streets are pretty small. They're one way, oftentimes. There was definitely a question of what was happening here. And there was a restriction on you couldn't actually rent them out. So if you wanted to truly do a mother-in-law quarters, then that's what you'd have to do. But they were saying there were going to be all these restrictions. So anyway, that one failed. Assembly Bill 211 was a bill that they talked about for having more enforcement when it came to maintenance. This was actually saying that if there was deferred maintenance that was not being taken care of, that a third party would be able to take over the property until the repairs were made. So they were literally saying like the county or the city could come in and take over the property and ensure that repairs were being made. This is something that I don't know exactly how they're going to enforce this and what's going to happen because we have code enforcement and whatnot. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see what they're saying here. I think that what they're trying to do is just give enforcement more teeth. So that passed.
That passed. That will be an interesting one to see how it rolls out. And for us, it's a pretty simple one to avoid anything negative that comes with that. Just make sure that you're staying on top of maintenance and obviously not leaving tenants sitting there with problems going on.
So again, I think it's just giving more teeth to the things that already are in existence with the county and the cities, but we'll kind of see how they detail those things out. AB 223, which was kind of known as like the renters' rights bill. And this one actually showed up last session as well. And there were a ton of things they had put in there where a lot of people just disagreed, and it was very heavy as far as the burden on the landlord. So it failed last go round and it failed this go round. Really what they were specifically trying to focus on was habitability and tenants' recourse. If you have a landlord who isn't taking care of the things and redefining what habitable housing was, then the tenants could withhold rent. This was the thing that I thought that it's not going to go because the tenants already have a recourse. You can do a withholding of rent with a 14-day notice to cure to the landlord. There are already things in place, and I think that oftentimes tenants don't know it already exists. So unless they actually do seek out some legal or they try and actually talk to like the housing court or something like that, they're not getting the right guidance. And unfortunately, I think then that concern gets up to some of our legislators and they're like, oh my gosh, there's no way for the tenants to say anything. No, there is.
There definitely
There
is.
is.
Yeah.
It was giving them additional recourse, which I don't even know what they thought could be additional recourse outside of let's just withhold our rent. That's the most damaging one to the landlord, right?
It absolutely is. Or, in some cases, they can actually go have the repairs made and reduce that from the rent that they're paying too. But I know that for some people, that can be sort of a complicated thing because there are, like you said, notices and things that have to be put in place for you to do that without running into problems. But typically, like if you end up in court, like an eviction or something, and these things are an issue, the judge is going to look at that sort of thing, and it's not going to be good for the landlord, right? In most cases.
Yeah, it doesn't look very kindly on the landlord who is trying to avoid actually dealing with the thing. There's definitely consequences that happen to that kind of behavior. And again, so I think that's really why this bill failed, because we have mechanisms that are already in place. I don't know what else they were trying to do there. But one of the weird little clauses in this bill was also requiring the landlord's contact information to be provided. Remember we talked about this?
We did, which was such a weird one to us. I mean, just being in apartments and the way that we put our leases together and contact information is so important. Skylar loves that they have all of our different contact information. They're calling us, emailing us, texting us. For us, that's just kind of a given.
They were trying to slip that into that one and it didn't go. SB 223, renters' rights, vetoed. Senate Bill 166. This one was really interesting. This talked about insurance companies and dog breed discrimination. Insurance is a hot topic right now, and we've been kind of talking about this ongoing, right? But this bill specifically said insurance carriers are not allowed to deny a policy or add premiums to a policy or whatnot based on the breed of dog that you have. I think that's a good thing. And we talked about this, right? Really, how do we combat bad behavior when it comes to pets?
Mm-hmm.
There's a different way. And the fact that insurance companies were kind of jumping onto this and making more money or actually denying policies, I thought, wow, I'm not a big fan of insurance anyway. I think they're a huge scam. And we're seeing issues, right,
Mm-hmm.
in just transactions because of insurance.
Right. Yeah, we've had several properties trade and the new owners were unable to get insurance for a variety of different reasons. And so I definitely agree on this one too. I think that's going to be beneficial for landlords and renters moving forward.
Yeah, this one passed and it actually is effective October 1st of this year. No more with the insurance carriers being able to kind of mess people over based on the type of pup they have. So
Yeah.
AB 283. This one was the one everyone was watching, right? At least in our industry. This is the eviction one. They were trying to change the eviction process and shift more responsibility over to the landlords and property managers. Essentially, what was going to happen is they were saying, and this is so funny because, again, Nevada is one of the very few that's just a summary eviction state. We don't get rent. We file. If the tenant doesn't answer, it goes and the judge signs off and that's it. You could have a lockout done with, 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on the days, right?
Right.
We would have had to file. Then the tenant would file. And then we would have to file again. And then the tenant would file. So it was like an extra 10 days possibly or more.
Except when making it more complicated, the need for probably more legal assistance, right, to kind of get through that process.
Yeah. The testimony was so interesting on this one, and I was so irritated. I couldn't be in Carson City that day, which is frustrating. But the testimony was, oh, well, the tenants don't know that an eviction is happening. I'm like,
Not true. Yeah.
You don't know that you didn't pay rent?
It's like a one-page thing that gets posted on their door, too, that clearly lays it out. Like that you are going through an eviction. Here's where you go to go ahead and talk to a judge or to kind of give your side of the story in court. And as long as they do that, we all end up in court and we can talk through it. So I think Nevada has a very fair process, in my opinion.
I do, too. And actually, it was 3 sessions ago, we changed our serving processes, remember? Because we used to be able to post ourselves and then move on and then mail it to them or whatever. And now we can't. We're not allowed to. So there was legislation that was passed right before COVID that said, you know what? No, you have to have a legal process server, an attorney, or a deputy constable serve the tenant to let them know that they are being served the 7-day pay or quit. There is, again, a mechanism that's already been put into place additionally. But the testimony, the guy was like, well, there's no way they know. I'm like, yeah, okay.
They definitely
We
know.
are
Yeah.
being held to, you've got to be able to show your proof of service.
They make sure that residents know, like, at every point of the process. In the beginning, when you are initially starting that eviction, they're going to make sure they know with the notice that's posted. But even all the way at the end of the eviction, when it's coming to an end and they're getting ready to do the lockout, there's going to be a notice on their door the day before. So it seems like they've got a lot of things in place to make sure nobody's surprised about it. I know that here in Nevada, the evictions move like more swiftly than other areas. But like I said, I think it's a lot more fair. It's something that I think draws a lot of investors and developers here in the area. We've heard the horror stories from clients that come here from other areas where they have residents that are not paying for months and months, even years, and they just have no recourse, no way to get the residents out. Where here, it's much more fair. Landlords can start that process. Tenants can go in, kind of speak their side of it, and they'll make a decision from there. And a lot of times they'll work with both sides depending on what the situation is.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a good thing. This was vetoed by the governor. That's what we wanted, because having just more hoops to jump through, it's already, I think, covered well enough, to your point. So I think it is balanced and fair. If you're reading the notices, then you know what's happening. So we liked that. We were watching that one very, very carefully. So the next one, AB 201, was an automatic eviction case sealing. So people could request that their eviction cases were sealed. This would have just automatically sealed every single eviction out there, which we were like, what?
Yeah, why?
Why would we do that? Why? I mean, if someone really feels that strongly and they want to seal the eviction case, and there's some sort of process, right, that has to be gone through, this was vetoed, because I was like, well, that doesn't help us.
No, it doesn't.
SB 391, the limitations on corporate landlords. Now, do you remember this? There were these huge companies coming in and buying blocks of homes.
Yes.
Especially in Southern Nevada. And they were trying to do, what this bill was, introduced restrictions on how many rental properties they could have. So I think it was like up to like 100 or something like that. Now, that doesn't stop you from like forming a new LLC and getting another one. I guess it's something, right? Because we have these companies just scooping up tons of inventory. Well, it failed. It didn't even make it out of one of the houses. I can't remember which one. If it was the Senate or the Assembly. It didn't make it through both houses. So it didn't even make it to the governor's desk. It just didn't go.
Wow, that's interesting to me. I would have thought with Reno, our infrastructure here, the inventory, the limitations on how much more can be built, that they wouldn't look at that or wouldn't put something together to help with that sort of issue.
Yeah, it's kind of strange.
It is.
So that was a no-go. Assembly Bill 280 was this pilot program for rent caps for seniors, and then the rental fee transparency portion of it, which, again, we talked about this last time about how your tenants should know how much they're paying for things. Like your moving costs and everything should be detailed out very clearly, whatever additional fees and whatnot there are. So this was the proposed rent caps for seniors at 5%, and they were going to have this go until, I think, December of next year, December of 26. So I get what they were trying to do here, because your senior population is typically on a fixed income and we want to make sure that no one's being gouged. But at the same time, I was not a fan of this, because I thought that this was the beginning of a slippery slope.
I agree. Yep.
So that was vetoed.
Okay.
We're okay with that.
Yes.
AB 475. It was so funny. So this bill, everyone was talking about right in the very beginning. And then it took me a while to like chase down where this bill was going. It was stuck in Ways and Means for a while because it has to do with money. And so this was a request for additional funding for any rental assistance or eviction diversion programs and things like that. This did pass. Clark County is getting $15 million. The city of Reno is getting $5.2. Rural Housing Authority is getting $750.
Okay.
Obviously, people are still seeing a need for some sort of at least eviction diversion and some rental assistance. And I don't know how long they have to spend this. Like I said, I was really looking for some information on this, and it was just like, oh, everyone got some money. I was like, oh, okay. So It sounds like a lot, but it's really not. $5.2 million to share between Sparks and Reno that's not anything.
No.
We'll see how that goes. But it did go, so we'll see some extra funds floating around. AB 480. I can never say this word. I don't know why. I struggle. Disparate. Disparate.
Desperate. Yep.
I kept saying desperate. It's not desperate. It's disparate. Disparate impact discrimination, which I was like, what the heck is this? This is actually already kind of covered on the federal level. They were trying to introduce this very specific type of discrimination into Nevada statute, which the governor was like, no, this is covered. And disparate discrimination is essentially discriminating without intending to.
Okay.
So the one example that they had in testimony was the landlord cannot have restrictions like if you call the police more than twice in 6 months, they can evict you.
Yeah, to me, that's ridiculous, because what if you need to call the police more than twice in 6 months? I mean, I get it. It's a situation where it's being abused, but we've worked with enough properties, enough residents where at times there are those situations where you're not discriminating. You just need to notify police of some sort of activity going on.
Well, the discrimination part comes in because they're like, well, what if you have victims of domestic violence? And so now you're discriminating against potential victims of domestic violence. It was such a weird...
That is a weird one.
I know. And that's why I was like, well, that was a bad example. Like, you guys
right?
did not have a really good argument for this. And it is kind of already covered federally. So the governor's like, I'm not doing this. This is redundant.
So if it would have passed, we would have had to count the number of times that we're having to reach out to law enforcement.
And again, that was a very specific situation. So
Okay.
I have a feeling that someone said something and got to a legislator and was like, oh my God. And of course, the legislator's like, oh, that's terrible. But they don't understand the whole scope of what we have to do and the protections that are already in place, I guess. So
Sure.
Anyway, got vetoed. The other big thing is the Nevada Lands Bill. And there are several pieces to this. And this is actually an Assembly joint resolution in Congress. But the reason we cover this is because it has to do with the entire state and a lot of different points here. So it's supported-ish by all representatives of Nevada, Cortez Masto, Rosen, and Amadei's office in some fashion, right? At first, Amadei was the one who was really carrying the torch on this and then kind of moved on. And I think they're kind of carrying same torch, but it's now been splintered off into smaller torches and kind of have different focuses and with slightly different focus. So the big thing here is we're addressing land use, right? Do you know how much land Nevada actually owns, the state of Nevada actually owns of its own land?
To be honest, I don't know.
Okay, so it's not a lot. It's 20%.
Okay. Yeah.
That's not a lot. And that's why we're having this issue now with land scarcity, because the Bureau of Land Management actually owns 80% of our land.
Wow. Okay.
So we have to ask Congress to release our land back to us so that we can build and expand and do some different things. That's kind of the big overall conversation. But then, of course, following that will be conservation efforts. How is it affecting the environment? Amadei actually had this idea about doing public land sales, and people were upset about that, so he withdrew it. It did not go.
Okay.
There's some tribal concerns because we have quite a bit of tribal land and we want to be working with everybody. So that's still in the process. And this bill, in all honesty, has been in the process for well over a decade.
Oh, wow.
This has been going on for a long time. But because of the rapid growth, I think that's where it's like, oh man, we're out of land.
Yeah.
Really usable, buildable land. And this is where you start talking about the conversation of density building. So we're probably going to start seeing more mid-rises and maybe even high-rises in Reno and Sparks.
Yeah, kind of out of other options. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we kind of are. And so that's the argument, right? Is that, well, what are people going to do? Where are we going to go? Lots of things to consider there, especially environmentally. I think there's a big argument there about conserving plants and animals, and which of course are very important, but this is also the conversation we have when it came to the lithium mine in Nevada. So it's going to keep going. I don't know if we will see resolution even in the next 5 years, but they have to keep the conversation going.
Sure.
So yeah, I know that was just a lot of lots of information that was happening there.
Oh yeah.
But I will tell you, for us in our industry, right, that these were actually a win. So even though I said vetoed, we needed them to not pass because there were some things that absolutely could have made our jobs way harder than they already are.
And even harder for the tenants as well, I think. Sometimes they think they're trying to provide more protection to the tenants, but really overcomplicating things at times could just make it harder on the industry as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point about the eviction, we were watching that one very closely. That would have added more time, definitely more money. It would have started getting more complex for your investors and whatnot that are here in the area providing housing. That is what it comes down to. I'm glad that the governor really looked at it and said, okay, we're looking at the process that's in place and how it's serving our residents now. And it did make sense. So
Yeah.
I am really glad that did not go. Overall, I think it was really interesting. The governor actually set a record for how many bills he vetoed. He has, I think, the highest number of vetoed bills, which when I read a lot of his reasoning to why he vetoed, it was because he said there are overarching laws or statutes or a different enforcement mechanism that are available. I don't want to just keep making laws to make laws. There are things that are already in place and they need to actually be made in the appropriate way. So he wasn't just trying to add more to Nevada revised statute. If there were other organizations or some other arching thing, he expects them to be able to A, make their own policies and procedures, and B, enforce them instead of making it a state issue. So I actually was kind of glad, because just adding laws every session, every 2 years, it's a lot, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we got another 2 years then until we start looking at new bills coming in.
Yeah. I will say that one of the things that, since it did pass, was the insurance carriers and whatnot not being able to have breed restrictions. This is something, I'm not saying that you as a property manager shouldn't have breed restrictions. I get why they do, but I would re-examine your policies. I think that that's a good thing to just look at. And why? When was the last time you looked at your pet policy? Just to update it and just review it and really make sure that you understand it, because the pet thing is not going to go away, whether it's a pet or a service animal or an emotional support animal, which we have a whole episode dedicated to.
Yep, that's right.
Because it's a lot. But I would just re-examine your policies just to make sure that everything is in line and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Overall, like I said, there were a lot of vetoes. And I think given the federal administration and what President Trump is doing and has commented on and has already done when it comes to federal monies, there's been a lot of programs that have been either put on hold or lost funding altogether. I'm not going to comment either way, good or bad, on that. But what I am going to say is I think depending on how the nation moves this summer into fall, if money is going to flow or not, what the markets are doing, those kind of big picture ideas, I think we might see a special session. If the economy doesn't kind of pick up a little bit, I think that we're going to have to re-examine the state budget, and I think that the governor might call a special session this fall.
Interesting.
So they'll be back in Carson City sooner than 2 years. That's really all I had. Like I said, it's always like such a information dump, but a lot happened.
It is, and it's good to keep an eye on these things, so I'm glad we did this update.
Fast and Furious, there you go. And of course, questions, comments, concerns, reach out to us.